From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have for you on the menu. Star power. Bono rubs shoulders with political elites while we talk celebrity influence and star politicians. Ready for Russia? NATO launches one of its largest military exercises since the end of the Cold War. Political rats, the rodents threatening to infiltrate the mayoral campaign in Paris. No news, good news. Reading into Brexit silence as Barnier briefs the EU Commission. And in tonight's Raw Moment, did Donald Trump just float his daughter for UN ambassador? Well, it's time to meet our panel tonight. We have, of course, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor at Euronews. Darren, which of these stories do you like?
Well, I think it has to be star power. They used to say that politics was show business for ugly people. Well, at the moment, you can't get away from celebrities in politics, whether it is Bono here today or indeed Donald Trump in the White House. But we'll talk about, I don't know, is it a good thing? Do we need more celebrities?
Absolutely, but everybody did know Bono is in Brussels. All right, joining us tonight also is Esther Zalan. She's a reporter with the EU Observer covering populism and Brexit. Esther, which of the stories are you watching?
I'm going to have to go with Brexit. I mean, even though there's no news today, it's always interesting to see what negotiators cook up as we enter the really final stage of the negotiations.
I know, it's so interesting that there's no news today. And joining us also is Catherine Styler. She's a British MEP with the Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. Catherine, which one are you watching?
I think Ivanka ambassador. I mean, who would have thought? You know, I think that, but then the unthinkable becomes the thinkable in the kind of politics that we're existing within today. So we'll have to watch that space. But
exactly, you just never know.
I just feels a bit uncomfortable, the nepotism, but we have to wait and see.
Absolutely. All right, we have a lot to talk about tonight. Let's start with our top story. From poverty and hunger to the environment and peace. Bono is certainly no stranger to saving the world. But now the U2 frontman has a new cause, saving Europe. And today he was here in Brussels meeting with the presidents of the European Parliament. And while Africa development may have been the official reason, the future of Europe quickly dominated the discussion.
As an artist, I think I probably have a role to play in romancing the idea of being a European and seeing it as something warm-blooded. Europe is a thought that needs to become a feeling, and I'm, as an artist, in the service of that.
Well, Bono is just one of several stars to get political this week. In the UK, on Brexit, Sir Patrick Stewart of Star Trek fame said that he will play for people who want to attend the People's Vote March in London. And in the US, pop star Taylor Swift broke her long silence in politics by endorsing the Democrats. And then we have the rapper Kanye West, who will launch a lunch at the White House with Donald Trump tomorrow. All right, I will go to Catherine. Just a quick reaction on Bono in Brussels. What do you think of that?
I just thought it was great. I mean, the thought becoming a feeling. How to capture a moment. And I think a lot of us are feeling that. We feel European, and being a Scot who voted to remain in a country that's leaving the EU, it captures that. So I think it was great he was here today.
And you, Esther, do you think it was a good thing?
I'm a bit skeptical. Let's wait and see how much momentum really Bono can galvanize for Europe ahead of the elections next year.
Saving Europe is a big task indeed. But Darren, you managed to get a question in.
Rather funnily, of course, remember when he started his latest tour, he was going to wave the EU flag around. And several concerts later had to cancel because he lost his voice,
exactly.
Which is how many would feel aware the European Union is right now. But as you say, I managed at that press conference to get a question to Bono. And on this idea about is he really trying to save Europe? Is that his mission? Let's have a watch. So Bono, does it need a song as well? Do a kind of song for Europe?
A song and a dance. And well, you think about the mythology of America, and you think about Hollywood and how Hollywood perpetuated the idea of the American dream. It's hard to imagine when you think about artists involved in the project that is Europe. There's not that many, and I think we need more.
All right, so celebrity in the politics, do they really have influence or do they think they have influence? I think, Esther, I know where you stand on this. You're skeptical.
I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, they can really step up support for a cause or draw attention to an issue, but on the other hand, they take away attention from the substance. And sometimes it's really just then becomes a focus on whether other celebrities, where they stand, or this celebrity, where it stands. So I think it can divert the attention really on the core issues.
But do you think there's an actual impact?
I do. I think they reach to people. When politics, so often politics, people are put off by politics. And I think when they come out and they say, this is important to me, people listen to them. And I think that's important.
If you look at the independence referendum campaign in Scotland, there were a lot of celebrities who got involved in that.
A lot of people in the arts were very involved in the debate, and I do think that you know, celebrities are human beings as well, and I think it brings out a kind of human element often to things that feel very distant from people. When they say something about what they believe in, people do listen to it.
I think that's the key thing now, isn't it? That celebrities are, in essence, they're not just celebrities in their own field, but they're influencers, and they have got platforms, and clearly they can engage particular sections of society who aren't engaged in politics. And I have to say, as someone who believes that participation in civic society and in democracy as a generally good thing, I think celebrities can encourage people to do that more, or to make people think about issues they haven't thought about. That's not a bad thing. And I think, you know, Bono did go on a lot today, and sometimes it is quite difficult to listen to him, and I know people are quite divided. He has got a point about this sense of European identity. You know, Europe is a disparate place, much like the United States, but actually culturally the United States has been very good at selling a sense of what it is to be an American. Europe has not done that.
Could it backfire? Because some people are saying that actually maybe because of him, people might become more Eurosceptic because they're looking at what he's doing.
Well, do you think that? I think someone coming out and saying, I feel European, I have an identity as a European, that's the current state we're in. I think that's a good thing. And I think more people need to express what it means to be a European, because it's about something that's bigger than all of us. And at the moment we're in this identity politics, I think Bono saying that gives a platform and others a voice.
Yeah, I think...
But it is Bono.
Go ahead.
That's for some people the problem.
When Bono said there should be a song and a dance for the EU, I already envisaged a 10-year procedure on choosing the right song and the right dance. But I think, yes, that's important that you can connect to him and there is a personal feeling and attachment. But it's also dangerous when celebrities get into politics like Donald Trump. So
I wanted to bring in some interesting statistics because we just saw Taylor Swift earlier. You know, they're from vote.org. They saw a 65,000 increase in voter registration in 24 hours versus 57,000 in a month. So just because she came out and spoke, you actually have.
But she spoke to a very specific audience, like the young people who haven't registered before in that big of a number.
But it pushed them to action within 24 hours. I mean, that does say something about political celebrity influence.
And you know, that's a good thing. I mean, getting out the vote, we have to be honest. I mean, voting, getting people to vote is something we'd all agree with. And if she can do that, good for her.
I don't necessarily agree that it's a bad thing. No, to have celebrities involved in politics. It's nothing new. I mean, we look at Ronald Reagan, for example. You know, he was an actor, and lots of Americans seem to think that Ronald Reagan, in retrospect, was a very good American president. I think even Democrats would appreciate that Arnold Schwarzenegger was not necessarily a bad Democratic governor Republican governor of California.
And somebody was Austrian as well.
There you go. So, you know, celebrity in politics isn't nothing new. It is primarily an Americanism. It does happen here in Europe. You've got Beppe Grillo.
And it does go both ways, because it's not just celebrities becoming politicians, it's also politicians who kind of, you know, build their celebrity. Let's have a look at some of these recent videos featuring Council President Donald Tusk and Commission spokesperson Margarita Skinas.
So starting in 3, 2, 1. Does Brexit means Brexit?
Yes.
Is the EU a safer place to live in than 4 years ago?
Yes.
Are we in a trade war?
No.
Is the future of Europe more Europe?
That's a difficult one.
We're done.
There we go. You have a movie trailer, you have Skinas, they're having a bit of fun. I mean, why do you think they're doing this?
Well, the EU has had a problem, an image problem for decades, and it's somehow difficult to engage people, citizens, with the European project, with the European identity. And I think these games and shows are sort of serving that purpose
to try and get more involved. But do you think this? Some people are saying the cult of personality, it dumbs down the debate.
Yeah, I think people need. We look at a really good example, Theresa May with her bizarre little dance last week. People feel that they need to be able to relate to politicians. And there has been a problem, particularly with European politicians, that Brussels seems a very long way away. They don't necessarily know who these people are, and they don't feel that they can relate to them. So any attempt, I think, by the European Union to try and show some form of personality, that these people are actually just real people, is a good thing. But you're right. What we've also seen, particularly with the rise of populism across Europe, is a sense of cult of personality around certain politicians. And we also see it with Donald Trump in the United States. That has got the potential to be quite worrying.
Yeah, because we're talking about content versus image. Policy itself, would that be to the detriment of the debate itself?
It would depend on how they're doing it. So I think with Taylor Swift, I think that was an excellent way of trying to get more people to vote. But other people, it's their intentions, isn't it? So hers was to get more people out to vote. Other people might be for more selfish reasons. So I think you can't put a blanket thing saying everyone's the same. I think it depends on the circumstances. It depends on the issue. And I think all power to her for getting that vote out.
And European Parliament elections are coming up.
And they are. We need to think about that. You know?
I want to see a bit more.
I won't be standing, but I think that for our elections next year, I do think.
Who would you say is the most famous MEP?
Oh God, that's a really good question. I mean, it's true.
Not even MEPs going to be the most famous MEPs.
But it's true. I remember in my first Parliament, I sat next to Mario Soares, and I just felt this is a man of history. And yet people back home might not have known who Mario Soares was as the first democratic elected president of Portugal. So for me, maybe as a political person, that was something.
Let's talk about a man who's becoming a celebrity in his own right, I think. Europe's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, briefed commissioners today on the state of negotiations. The update comes 1 week before European leaders gather in Brussels for the EU summit, and many hope to have a deal or at least break the deadlock by then. But there were few hints about progress today.
Michel Barnier, our chief negotiator, briefed the college this morning on the latest state of play around the Article 50 negotiations with the United Kingdom. He recalled that decisive progress must be made in time for the October European Council next week, and negotiations at technical level will continue this week.
Michel Barnier and his team are working day and night to reach a deal, but we are not there yet.
So they're speaking, but they're not actually saying anything. I mean, what's your reading into this not saying much?
Well, because the negotiations are ongoing, and the key issue is the Irish border issue right now, and that needs to be resolved before the summit if we are going to have a deal, a withdrawal deal between the UK and the EU. So I think the work is very intensive, and there were some rumors early in the week that there is some progress and that the UK would come around to the proposed solution of the EU. Now those voices are a bit more silent and reluctant, but let's see. As Barnier usually says, the clock is ticking, and we have the summit next week and one final chance next month in November at another summit. So work needs to be done.
Normally we do get leaks. Do you think that we are actually much closer to a deal because no one wants to jinx it seems?
I think we're at a very sensitive stage, hence why we've seen the choreography change quite a lot in the last couple of days. There was an expectation we were going to see new proposals published on the Irish border from the British, and an expectation that we get more detail on the future trade relationship from Michel Barnier published. Both those things have not happened. To a degree, because, as I say, negotiations are so sensitive. Look how things are so tricky, though. We have got the possibility now in these negotiations that in order to avoid a hard border or a border in the Irish Sea, that Theresa may get what she wanted, which is to keep the UK essentially inside the customs union. The European Union said they do not want that. They might give ground on that. But then, this afternoon, the DUP the people who hold the balance power at Westminster, have said that if Theresa May compromises on their red line, that Irish border in the Irish Sea, that they would vote down the UK budget at the end of this month. Essentially a massive blow to confidence. So it is this massive, Brussels is having to deal with London, but London's having to deal with what's happening in Parliament and the DUP, and Dublin has to be kept happy as well. It's incredibly.
But there is a feeling that Theresa May is going to be the first one to blink. I mean, what is your assessment of this?
I mean, I think every week it seems to change, or even daily it changes. I think that at Westminster, the politics around that, what happens with the Chequers deal, what happens when that comes to be voted upon. Yes, at a technical level, things are being negotiated, and there's two different things, the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, and sometimes we just merge the two together. I think with the withdrawal agreement, it's 90% there, apart from the Irish border question. The political declaration is much more tricky because there's division within her cabinet, there's division within the government, there's division within the Parliament, and then it becomes all the politics of what's going on at Westminster. So it's a moving feast, and we just don't know.
There are so many cogs moving in this. It's quite difficult for anyone, really. Even Michel Barnier, probably. Why he's up day and night, we're told, repeatedly.
But the political declaration on the future relation is also held back as a sort of a trade-off with the Irish border issues to make Theresa May blink.
I mean, I think we just gotta wait, I think, for that. All right, well, there's another story that we are watching tonight also. An American astronaut was forced to apologize this week after he quoted the former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Alex Morgan and our team in the Cube have been following this story. Alex, what is this about?
Tessa, Winston Churchill, a towering figure of the 20th century, seen in Great Britain and indeed around the world as the man who led the fight against Nazi Germany when it seemed the odds really were against Western Europe. But others have a different view. Now, let's bring you up the story here. This is Scott Kelly. He's a NASA astronaut, retired now, but this was his quote, quoting what he called one of the greatest leaders of modern times, Winston Churchill, in victory, magnanimity. I guess those days are over. Shortly after, though, he tweeted this. Did not mean to offend anyone by quoting Churchill. My apologies. I will go and educate myself further on his atrocities, racist views, which I do not support. He says his quote there was about calling for America to come together. So how do we go from the world's greatest leader to this tweet? Well, it was the backlash that Scott Kelly got in his Twitter feed. Users like Shardine here talking as well about this, saying that Churchill had white supremacist views. He believed white Western people to be superior to other races, particularly those who had lost land in the Americas, indigenous people. Also saying that it was the establishment since the war that has eulogized him, that it was ordinary people who won the war, and this idea that it was Churchill is too romantic. Other people pointing out Churchill's policies in the 1943 famine in Bengal led to millions starving, saying Churchill prioritised food supplies to Europe over feeding people when this famine was going on. These arguments are complicated and historians are divided on them. But then the backlash against the backlash kicked off with the UK Foreign Secretary leading the charge, saying he couldn't disagree more. No one should ever apologise for quoting Churchill, says Jeremy Hunt. No human being did more to further democracy and freedom for everyone, respective of race, colour or creed, saying it was Churchill who was a leading man in defeating Hitler here. So what is this? Is this, as Jonathan Arnott's calling it here, revisionist history, saying, well, who can't we quote next? Abraham Lincoln? What, effectively saying here, this is a modern take. But other people disputing that, saying, as Dr. Louise Raw does, a UK historian, please, she says, for the love of God, white people dismissing critics of Churchill's flaws as being a scold, she's saying here, and using the argument, we're all flawed cliches, hugely undermines the pain still felt in regions like Bengal. So the argument goes on, and it's impossible to sum up in this time, but Scott Kelly certainly kicked off a debate I don't think he saw coming.
All right, thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. Indeed, a real, debate here. So, there are a lot of people from history that said things in the past that are considered politically incorrect today. So, is it correct to view those from today's lens? What do you think?
Don't look at me first. This is so complicated.
I know, it's complicated because, I think what's happened here is that he's generally put up a quote and then people have attacked him, and he's reacted to that. Now, the thing is with Twitter, do you react to those things, and do you then, and that's, I think, his reaction then has led to more and more, and it's spiralled. I think when you quote somebody, I think every time that you use Twitter, you should always be
But what about
careful.
political correctness,
what do you think about
though?
Winston Churchill?
But what I think about Winston Churchill is someone who isn't obviously from his political family. I think in the war, he was a leader. I think that the quote that he's used, I don't disagree with that quote. Yes, you can reflect on historical figures, and we can do that through this, who live by different means. That's true. But I think we have a building after Winston Churchill in the European. Are we saying we don't name that building anymore after him? I don't think so. So I think that he was right to quote him. And I think the reaction is good to have a debate, and it's good to expose that. I think that's important. But I think, in my opinion, I think he was a great leader.
All right. Esther, what do you think?
I think
the political correctness, the lens that we're using.
Yes, poor astronaut might want to think about staying in space after this. But I agree. I mean, Churchill was a great leader at the time of the war, and of course we need to have a discussion on other aspects of his life and policies. But it needs to be balanced, the discussion as well, not just a view.
Yeah, and I still think, though, that Churchill's reputation does need to be challenged. You know, history is not written in stone. It is a constantly evolving thing. And we learn things about historical figures all the time that we thought we didn't know. And clearly, people view Winston Churchill in different ways, considering the experience that they may well have had. Now, it is not a surprise for Western Europeans. He is a war leader who freed them from the tyranny of Nazi or stopped the spread of Hitler. But, you know, Winston Churchill was not just the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He had a whole political career before that. And that's what I mean. He was a different person.
He changed political parties.
Indeed. And so it is perfectly fine and legitimate for people. Yeah, of course, you should be able to quote him.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
I think we all agree on that.
All right. Indeed. We have a lot more coming up on Raw Politics tonight. As Donald Trump loses a key ally at the United Nations, we ask what Nikki Haley's resignation means for Europe. Plus, to Russia with love, NATO sends a not-so-subtle message to Moscow with one of the largest military exercises since the Cold War. That's after the break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, last month, the West looked on nervously as Russia held its biggest joint military drill with China since 1981. Now, NATO is getting ready to flex its military muscles back. British troops disembarked in Rotterdam today ahead of NATO's biggest military exercises on the northern flank since the Cold War. The soldiers are en route to Norway for the Trident Juncture exercise, which launches on the 25th of October. And the war games involve 45,000 soldiers, more than 60 large ships, 120 aircraft, and 10,000 vehicles. Well, with me in the studio to talk European defense, Russian threats, and war games, we have Euronews journalist for the Russian service, Andrei Bekatov. Thank you for joining us. Rasmussen Global's Chief Strategy Officer, Fabrice Potier, and Austrian MEP with the Green Party, Klaus Buchner. All right, I will put this question to you first, Fabrice. You know, is this NATO exercise right now, is it antagonizing Russia? Is it preparation, or is it saber rattling?
No, I think it's neither of those. It's just training and exercise,
really,
long plan in advance. No, absolutely. And it's defensive in their nature. They are fully transparent. The Russian observer and all the other OSCE observers have been invited to the exercise. The main thrust of the exercise has been announced ahead. So there's no surprise and there's no opacity. And NATO needs to exercise as a defensive alliance.
And the timing of it right after China and Russia had just done military exercises?
But I think the timing was planned already years ago. These exercises are cyclic. And it's not the same scale. We are talking here about 40,000 troops. The Russian exercise allegedly was 300,000 troops. So it's not the same scale.
All right, Andrei, what do you think? Is this antagonizing Russia, these kinds of military exercises?
Well, it's definitely a response. And it was planned before, of course, but they can't plan the increased tension. And Russia, of course, they started first this big series of maneuvers. Although the number of troops were grossly exaggerated, independent experts says, in fact, there were only about 300,000. It's a third of the whole Russian army. In fact, there were about 30,000. But what they did achieve is the movement of troops that was really impressive, to round up so many soldiers from all around the vast country put them in a position that was huge achievement, which NATO now has to match, because for them, mobility is another challenge as well.
All right, I just want to bring in a statement from Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO. He gave this statement to Raw Politics today. He said, as with all NATO exercises, Trident Juncture is not directed against any country or region. It is about ensuring our forces can work seamlessly together in a crisis. And he did also say that, that the Trident Juncture has been planned for around 5 years, as you were saying. So this is information from NATO. All right. Do we really believe, I'll put this to you, do we really believe this is not directed at any country? I mean,
well, look only at the place where it takes place. It's quite close to the Russian border, so it's clear what it is meant for. And it's clearly a response, as you have said, a response to the Russian exercises. And I agree, we need exercises. We are composed of many different nations. They need to exercise together. But is it really necessary to do it so closely to the border? I think it would have been much better to do it in a different place.
Is it necessary to do it so close to Russia? You were painting it as something neutral. It was planned. It's nothing to read into it. But it is close to the Russian border.
It is, and it's also in the Northern Atlantic, where Russia has some very regular movements of forces, especially the naval ones. But I think we need to distinguish something. This is not an exercise that is against Russia, where Russia is taken explicitly as a target or as the adversary. But obviously, like any exercise, this is a signal. This is a message sent to Russia and to any other potential adversary saying, we will do what it takes to defend our territory. And Norway is part of the NATO territory. And the Northern Atlantic is considered as a strategic area for the security of the alliance between North America and Europe. So I think it's about sending a message that is an important message, but it's not an escalatory one. It's more defensive one saying we can defend our territory.
Well, we don't know how Russia would probably view that. But let's. I want to bring something else, because last week Euronews spoke to German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen, where while she sees NATO as essential, she's calling for a reinforced European Defense Union that she hopes will become, quote, worthy of that name.
Denn ich sehe viele Gebiete, wo die NATO nicht gefragt hat, keine Sicherheitsstrukturen aufgebaut, einer europäischen Verteidigungsunion, die diesen Namen auch verdienen. Das haben wir in den letzten 1,5 Jahren, da haben wir einen Riesensprung nach vorne gemacht. Wir haben die Strukturen, die lange im Lissabon-Vertrag geschlummert haben, jetzt aus der Taufe gehoben. Das heißt, wir haben einen Rechtsrahmen für die Europäische Verteidigungsunion. Wir haben einen gemeinsamen Planungsprozess, damit wir eine strategische Kultur auch entwickeln als Europäer. Wann setzen wir denn unsere Kräfte?
All right, a European Defense Union, Klaus. Is this really necessary for Europe to do? And isn't it dangerous? I mean, are we actually thinking of actual war, traditional war?
Well, of course, you know the old Roman saying, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for the war. And in this respect, I think we need a common defense. That's for me clear. But common defense does not mean escalating. So we should be very careful what we do. We should exercise together, that's necessary, but we should do it in a way that it's no provocation to Russia. We should do it in a...
How is that possible? How do you do military exercise that's not a provocation? How does that work?
Well, let's put it in the other way. What Russia does is a provocation, very clearly. And so you should avoid this effect. You should have just a regular exercise, which you usually do in military terms every half year or every year. That's common. You should perhaps not do it in this size, and especially not on this place. That's my statement.
Would NATO, would a European Defense Union be competing with the relevance of NATO if the European Union were to come up with that?
I don't think so, especially because in the end, the heavy lifting, as we call it in military terms, so deterrence, including nuclear deterrence, is still going to be done by NATO for the foreseeable future. I think it's very welcome to have the European Defense Union. Europe should be able to do more and can do more, but I think we're still a long way from a Europe that can do the very heavy lifting that only NATO so far is capable of doing. So I don't think there is any threat as such. The question is, where do we put our political focus? Is it more at NATO or more in the EU? And where do we also put our money? Meaning, are we investing more in capabilities to do crises outside Europe, or are we putting more money in capabilities to do crises inside Europe? And I think, or at the border. And this is really the key question.
All right. We'll move on from here to across the Atlantic, because we've become used to talking about surprise resignations from the Trump administration. Well, last night it was the turn of Nikki Haley. She's the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So all eyes in Europe are now on who will take her place. And here's today's Power Play.
It was a blessing to go into the UN with body armor every day and defend America, but I will tell you that I think it's time.
This, the moment Nikki Haley resigned as U.S. ambassador to the UN. A pat on the back from the president, but there's reportedly disappointment in the White House that Haley resigned just before the midterm elections. There was immediately speculation that she was planning to run for the top job in 2020, but she dismissed such suggestions.
No, I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one.
24 hours later, and the world and Europe is watching nervously to find out who will fill Haley's shoes. She took a strong stance against Russia. That earned plaudits from European leaders, including the British and French UN ambassadors, who have both tweeted their support for Haley. Dina Powell is a Goldman Sachs executive and former senior White House official. She's reportedly the top candidate. Also said to be in the frame is Richard Grenell, who's currently the U.S. ambassador to Germany and worked at the UN under the Bush administration. Okay, quickly, you were reacting saying that was well handled by Nikki Haley.
Well, by both.
And by both,
because
okay.
I think it was a bit of a surprise, especially ahead of the midterms. And I think they both tried to save their face. And I think Nikki Haley, you have to watch her. She's got all the ingredients of a very potent Republican leader. I don't know if it's in 2020, but I think the midterms are going to be key for everybody to decide where's the wind going to blow in the next 2 years. But on the other hand, it's one of the few adults that was left in the room.
That's what they were saying,
with Secretary Mattis. And so it's a bit of a loss for, I think, the European allies. And it's a woman, and it mattered very much. So it sends a signal a bit of setback for Trump.
Yeah, Klaus, quickly, what do you think? Observing from Europe, I mean, what does this mean for Europe?
I agree very much with what you are saying. And I want also to stress a point that a woman in this place, I think, is a very positive signal.
It's a positive thing. Indeed. So we're going to have to watch Nikki Haley and where she goes afterwards. All right. Now, we have a lot more coming your way after the break. They're said to outnumber residents 2-1. Now, rats are entering Paris's election campaign. That's after a break. Welcome back. Now, a three-way discussion on CO2 emissions targets is getting underway tonight between the European Commission, the Parliament and the Council. Yesterday, after 14 hours of grueling debate, environment ministers agreed the Council's position of a 35% CO2 reduction target. That's 5% more than the German minister wanted. She backed the Commission's less ambitious target, but the Parliament had its hopes pinned on 40%. Meanwhile, a much-anticipated ban on one-use plastics took another bureaucratic step towards reality. A committee voted in favor of banning plastic objects like straws and cutlery for good. All right, joining me back is our editor, political editor, Darren McCaffrey. We have Esther Zalan, an EU Observer reporter, and we have Karl-Heinz Florenz, a German MEP from the EPP party. All right, let's take this because this conversation, it's been a very difficult 14 hours of debate. Let's take it to Germany because I think we have a very powerful lobby, automotive industry over there. I mean, this is really, the Germans didn't get exactly what they wanted. They wanted a lower target. Is Germany really the hindrance to any ambitious target for Europe in terms of the environment?
Oh, I think that the lobbyist of the European car industry is collapsed because the result is quite good. And you will see after the negotiation in the next days, we will come maybe closer to 40%. I personally tabled an amendment for 40%. As a German member, it was not so easy, but We are not far away from that, and I think that is what we need.
But do Germans care? German people, do they care about reduction targets? I mean, there's a love affair with cars there. There's economic dependence, and there's still on coal. I mean, do German people care?
Oh, the German people on the street are not so interested in that.
But the people?
The people, yeah. But the German industry, certainly they are interested. But the other way, if we see all our decisions in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, my friend said the car industry will collapse by 95%, 95% in the last for 8 years. And if you see now the value of the shares of the car industry, they are perfect. They never was such good as now. So the industry hasn't suffered one day. They make a lot of profit, and that's good. I like it. And you see that all the cars who are cleaner and cleaner are excellent to export in other countries. So we are in a good way.
And this 5% reduction, the middle ground that they found, it took them so long to get here. Esther, what do you think of this compromise that they came up with?
Well, I think it was a very interesting debate to look at, and I think what influenced many of the ministers' mind was several issues. The UN's report that came out recently on how fast...
The dire warning.
Yes, that climate change will happen faster and sooner than we anticipated, and we will have harsher consequences. Also, the technological competition with China, because China adapts to these new technologies, it seems faster. And also... the Dieselgate and the effort by the ministers to say something that we have learned from these mistakes and we will do better. So I think it would be very interesting to see if the ministers, because the ministers were actually in majority who favored the higher percentage, and so it was the compromise gave in to the
And I just want to point out that in Bavaria, the Greens are actually surging, and there's a strong grip of the AfD, the far-right party, over there as well.
Yeah, and I think we all... people or voters across Europe are starting to recognise the environmental impact that not least cars have.
Sure.
However, I think despite the huffing and puffing of the car industry and in manufacturers in places like Bavaria, cars in the next 20 years, most of them, almost all of them, will be hybrids or electric cars anyway. So actually this cap is really going to be applicable primarily to cars that have been made or be made in the not too distant future. So I think in the grand scheme of things, with those technological efforts that have been made, that the impact overall in the long term is actually going to be quite minimal.
This discussion definitely far from over. All right, let's move on now to France, because while this may not be an environmental problem, it's certainly a sanitation issue. It seems rats have scurried their way into politics. Let's take a look. The French capital is, of course, no stranger to the vermin. The 4 million strong population outnumber Parisians 2-1. Not everyone hates them. They've been romanticized in films like Ratatouille, and a recent Metro advert urged people to show them love and respect. But for everyone else, they're pests. And some say Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo is to blame. Her opponents say the infestation is a result of her poor record on public hygiene, and they've been quick to weaponize the issue ahead of the 2020 elections. One potential candidate, Geoffroy Boulard, has launched a rat hotline, a website, and a citizens brigade tasked with a rodent crackdown. One thing's for sure, anger over the infestation is at breaking point. Whoever can prove themselves to be the Pied Piper of Paris could be crowned mayor. Who hasn't seen a rat in Paris? And it sounds funny, but it's a serious problem, isn't it?
I hate rats. It is 4 million rats. It clearly is an issue that I think Parisian authorities are going to have to deal with. It's got to do with infrastructure. It's got to do with the fact that there has been this recent explosion in the rat population. But it is playing its way into politics. I'm not entirely... I mean, that campaign on the metro system in Paris says, stop the massacre of rats. There are sensitive individuals who can feel emotions.
And what's more important, they can eat 7 kilograms of trash per year. So, if you
there are benefits then?
I mean, there are benefits.
It has definitely entered politics. All right, let's go to tonight's raw moment. It's all about who will replace Nikki Haley, as we were talking about earlier, the soon-to-be former U.S. ambassador to the UN.
How good would Ivanka be? The people that know, there's nothing to do with nepotism. But I want to tell you, the people that know that Ivanka would be dynamite. But, you know, I'd then be accused of nepotism, if you can believe it, right?
I mean, he seems to have been joking, but Ivanka Trump as ambassador to the UN.
Yeah, worse enough. I think his whole life is a joke. But I think he lost any moral guidelines. And I'm 30 years in this house, and I saw a lot of things, but I didn't expect that I have to see in this time of years that such a crazy things are able to develop in the United States.
Yeah.
The policeman of the world is leading from such a person. It's a dramatic.
I think almost he is almost preparing the ground. It feels like.
I know, it feels like you never know what he's going to say
next. Of course, I got accused of nepotism. Yeah, that's because it is nepotism.
Exactly.
But I mean, he's done crazier things. Let's all admit that. Is it possible? It's certainly possible.
You were predicting that. You were predicting that it could possibly happen.
Yes, he's definitely testing the ground for it. And oftentimes he just throws an idea and tests how it feels, and then he can do it.
Exactly, seeing the reaction.
Maybe the only people who work for Donald Trump are actually his family.
Well, yes, watch this space. We'll be talking about that. All right, we'd like to hear your views. Thank you for watching us tonight. So do get in touch. I'm on Twitter, @Tessa and you can follow @Euronews as well and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Do have a good evening. Bye for now.